So we know it's our job as Christians to rightly divide the word of truth. And how are we supposed to do that? How do we know what to divide and where to divide? If only the very same verse that told us to divide also told us how to divide. Oh wait, it does. We have to study. So let's start with the Old Testament. So as we said in the last video, the plan of salvation for most Old Testament saints was through the law, which was given to Moses. Along with the Ten Commandments, this plan also contained a ritualistic sacrificial system for the pardoning of sin. See, through all the ages, both the Old and the New, sin is what separated us from God. God is perfect and holy, and if he allowed even the tiniest fraction of a percent of sin into his kingdom, then he wouldn't be 100% pure and holy. And since it's our flesh that contains sin, and the life of the flesh is in the blood, only blood can pay for sin. And we'll cover that in another video. In the Old Testament, this blood was shed through the daily sacrifices, and along with the Ten Commandments and the Book of the Law, Deuteronomy and Leviticus, salvation under the law of Moses was very much works-based. But even though this system very heavily relied on works, it actually wasn't works alone that saved these Old Testament saints. Faith and grace was still very much a part of this system of works. Yes, the Jews had to keep the law, but they also had to have faith. This is why by the time Christ shows up in the New Testament, the Jewish people are in such a poor state. Yeah, they're keeping the sacrifices, but they've lost their faith. The law had lost all its meaning to them. It was just transactional. Basically, the priest became a glorified butcher, and the sacrifice, which was once a delight to God, became a stench.
Though ye offer me burnt offerings and your meat offerings, I will not accept them. Neither will I regard the peace offerings of your fat beasts. Take thou away from me the noise of thy songs, for I will not hear the melody of thy viols. But let judgment run down as waters, and righteousness as a mighty stream.
One clear example of faith and grace in the Old Testament, under the Mosaic Law, is with King David, a man after God's own heart. He became king over Israel and committed two sins that had no sacrifice under the law for forgiveness: murder and adultery. David realized his crimes against God and pleaded with God not to take away his Holy Spirit from him. See, unlike today, you could lose the Holy Spirit in the Old Testament. And although the punishment under the law for David was death, God forgave him by grace through faith. So we can see that under the law of Moses, both faith and works were necessary for salvation. But what about before the law? How was salvation obtained for those saints? I think a good place to start is, well, the start with Adam and Eve. Although it's popular today to say that the Old Testament was all works, it was actually only ever all works with Adam and Eve. See, faith is a substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. And we know Adam saw and spoke with God, so there was no need for faith with him. But there was a work that they had to follow. Just one: not to eat the fruit of the tree of knowledge. Pretty simple, right? Well, we all know how that turned out. There are some great Bible studies that can be had on the plan of salvation directly after the fall of Adam concerning Cain and Abel, and I'm sure we'll cover it sometime in the future. But for the sake of time, we're going to just jump ahead to two figures that really encapsulate the plan of salvation between the fall of Adam to the law of Moses, and that's with Noah and Abraham. Both Noah and Abraham were God-fearing men, and their faith in God is what garnered them a blessing from God. But it wasn't faith alone. Works were mandatory. Noah had to build an ark, and Abraham had to offer up his son Isaac on the altar before God steadied his hand. So unlike the law of Moses, Noah and Abraham were first made righteous in their faith and were then perfected by their works. So there you have it. There's three clear divisions in the Old Testament for salvation. First with works alone through Adam, then faith and works before the law with Noah and Abraham, and finally with works and faith under the law of Moses. There's a lot more we could get into and make even further divisions, but the point of these videos are to keep things simple and to show you that there were in fact divisions in the Old Testament, just like there are divisions in the New Testament. And we'll begin dividing the New Testament in the next video to see where we stand in our salvation today by grace through faith in Jesus Christ. So, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.